Hello, Team Brandy. I am here to bring you Tuesday for the 12th. Delaying a little bit because I'm want to make sure this is connected. This Tuesday for the 12th, I'm bringing to you actually relates to some current events, some breaking news that we received across the Commonwealth here. So, for those who may not be aware, the Massachusetts Teachers Association is the largest education union here. In the Commonwealth, and over 2,000 educators and paraprofessionals and other members of that association received notices to not renew their contracts for the upcoming year. Um, Many of you know that education advocacy has been what I have spent most of my life doing. That's how I've learned our budget process and what it takes to actually get things done at the State House with partnership and collaboration for others. And so I just wanted to take a moment to discuss the implications of these layoffs that are being felt throughout the Commonwealth, and also what we can do about them to really make sure that our state budget for fiscal year 2021 truly is a reflection of our values. I think for any parents or caregivers, those who have guardianship over young people, particularly in the K through 12 system, I know you all have been waiting with bated breath to hear and to know what the school year is going to look like in the fall. And there's been some guidelines, some issuance related to that. And what has been made abundantly clear is in the era of COVID 19, as we continue to recover from the impact and the effects of this virus um, that has ensued, is that if we're going to have social distancing in our schools, that actually requires more professionals and not less. For those who might not be familiar, last winter, the Student Opportunity Act was finally passed. This was legislation that had been long overdue to update our funding formula. I had been a part of that fight for the last 10 years, and I do not use 10 years lightly, probably 10 plus and counting. First, there was pressure at the State House to at least have a commission look at our funding formula to see where it might be outdated or gaps. That took, I think, 1.5 to 2 legislative cycles, so 3 to 4 years to get that done. Then the commission took a couple of years. And then after the results came out of that report that made it abundantly clear that we were not fully funding our schools at the appropriate levels, it took another 6 to 7 years to finally get commitment from the legislature to update the formula to make sure our students across the Commonwealth have the resources they need. I'm just trying to provide you all with the context and the background there, because with COVID 19, those funds were set to go into place this upcoming fiscal year. And of course, you know, we're all concerned and mindful of any budgetary shortfalls and gaps we might have as a result of the impact on this pandemic. I was alongside so many advocates advocating for these increases to the budget, advocating for the commission to even occur so we could see where the gaps are, making sure that we were providing funding levels. And I think it's also worth noting here in Massachusetts, unlike many other states, and certainly unlike our federal government, we have written into our Constitution that education is a right. And so that makes it a little different because it holds us all publicly accountable to make sure that our students are being provided with the best quality education possible. And so it's actually a higher standard than what the federal government says we need to provide education. And so as a Commonwealth, we need to live that out. I want to be very clear that I'm not naive to the budget shortfalls that we are expected to experience, that we have already experienced as a result of this COVID 19 pandemic. But what we do know is that delaying implementation of the Student Opportunity Act means that Student Opportunities Act means we're going to pay for it down the line. We also know that delaying implementation comes at the cost of the students who are already hit hardest by the crisis. And I don't have to spell that out for this crew, but I will. We know that students of color, we know those are students and families from low income communities. And, with all that's happening in our nation today, the last thing I think we want to do as a Commonwealth is further exacerbate those racial gaps and inequities. And we know that equitable funding is a critical component to making sure those gaps don't persist. The upcoming fiscal year, the state needed to provide or at least add an additional $377.1 million to education funding in order to live out the first year of the 7-year phase for the Student Opportunities Act. I understand hearing that number, thinking about, the shortfall in tax revenue, for example, can make us get a little nervous. And for anyone who may have seen me in one of my masks, it says faith over fear. And there's actually action and work we can put behind our belief system, so that way our students and families aren't suffering in this upcoming academic year. I really want to give a shout out to the Massachusetts Budget Policy Center. They do Budget and Policy Center. They do such great work around how we can make our budget more equitable. What are the things that we might want to do? And, Massachusetts is so lucky to have the volume of advocacy organizations that we do that are already supplying the data and information. It just takes leadership and courage from our elected officials to actually live out those values and make them happen. And so there are actually a few things that we can do in the immediate term to try to close and recoup those budget shortfalls. And so I am going to share those proposals with you, naming that they are not my own proposals, but as state representative of the Suffolk 12th District, I assure you that I will have the courage, that I will be sure to advocate for these to make sure that we're not going to austerity, that we're not automatically cutting, that we're not thinking about what services that we know if we cut now we'll end up paying for dearly down the line, not only financially, but also in terms of our communities and their health as well. So some of the things, the policy things that we can do in the short term that I am committed to advocating for, should I be elected as the next state representative of the Suffolk 12th District, are the following. One is in January of 2021, there was supposed to be a state charitable tax that was going to go into effect, and basically it's just like it was a tax break for charitable giving at for certain individuals in a certain amount. The truth of the matter is it's probably not wise of us to actually implement that particular tax break right now. I think that we need to certainly delay the implementation of that tax break for January 2021 and perhaps even halt it altogether, depending on what the data shows as we continue to recover from this COVID-19 crisis. The other thing that we can do is in Massachusetts, we have this current policy called the single sales factor. Basically, what that means is, let's say there's a company here in Massachusetts, their employees are here, the manufacturer is here, the plant might be here, but let's say they don't sell one item in Massachusetts. Let's say they make all of their sales, I'll use my other state, Alabama, all their sales in Alabama. As a result, they don't actually have to pay Massachusetts any taxes on the proceeds of their sales. That's a really generous tax benefit and incentive, to lure companies to have them do work in Massachusetts, so that way folks are employed, and it's a costly one. I'm not saying we need to eliminate it altogether, but certainly we should consider reducing it while we recover from the COVID-19 crisis as a way to recoup some of that lost revenue that we are going to experience here in the state. Um, Another thing that is worth looking at is how we can recapture taxes from those larger corporations that engage in a practice called tax dodging. If anyone ever played dodgeball, or even if you've seen that movie Dodgeball, you know the ball comes at you and you try to avoid it. You try not to get hit with it. Just envision that as it relates to some major corporations with regards to tax liability. So trying to avoid paying those taxes, they're dodging it with whatever mechanisms might be available to them. It is estimated that that practice of tax dodging actually costs the Commonwealth about $450 million annually, which means those are funds. When we think about the 377.1 that the state committed to education funding, for example, that covers that and then some. And so I definitely think it's worth taking a look at that and seeing how we can recapture and recuperate those dollars to make sure that we are putting them to the things that we know our communities need in order to thrive. We also have to consider whenever Hollywood goes back into production, how we can either eliminate or reduce the film tax credit too, as a way to recoup some of that revenue loss. And of course, as many of you might be familiar, we do have the rainy day fund available to us. And I mean, that's the beauty and the value add of saving and putting some money aside for times such as these. And I'm not saying we should fully deplete it. I actually think we should be really thoughtful and take some time to reflect what it means to dip into that rainy day fund. But I think most of us would say we the clouds are here and the rain has begun. So I think it's worthwhile for our legislator and of course the governor also to examine when do we tap into the rainy day fund and how much. I don't think we should fully deplete it, and savings occurs for a reason, and so I think it's a worthwhile examination. I know that this Tuesday for the 12th was prompted and spurred by the announcement of the layoffs across the teaching profession throughout the Commonwealth here today. And the truth of the matter is that as we are recovering from this COVID-19 crisis, our inclination can be to cut. And I want us to really think about how can we actually be creative in recovering some of that lost revenue. And again, I just want to thank the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center for the work and the research they've already done on this. They are practical ideas. They are certainly feasible ideas. And as the next state representative of the Suffolk 12th, I will certainly advocate for these um, ways to recover our revenue so that way we don't have to cut the most vital services that we need for our communities and especially for our children here in the Commonwealth. Y'all, this is Brandy Fluker-Oakley, state representative candidate for the Suffolk 12th. Thank you so much for engaging in this Tuesday for the 12th. I'll also have the team just drop information. Reach out to your legislature. If some of these ideas you agree with and you want your current state legislator to advocate for them, feel free to send them a message, give them a call, let them know they are accountable to you. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this week's Tuesday for the 12th. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye bye.